Okay, in this tutorial we're going to look at creating a little platform game. This will be the start of it. There'll be a few more videos there with this and a few follow-ups. So first things first, we've already made a very quick start. So we've made a player and a wall sprite, and we've made a player and a wall object. So the first thing I'm going to do in the room, and just double clicking on the room, we're going to add two new instance layers in. I'm going to call one wall. So right click on it, rename, call one wall. And then the other one called player. And with the player, we're just going to dump a player in. And with the wall, what we're going to do is just drag a wall in, drag it out a little bit. Maybe put an end block there, and then this coming out a little bit as well. And if we need to, then we can copy and paste that a little bit and just make like another level up here. Copy and paste it and make another level up there. Okay, so that's what we've got so far. If we compile this, you'll see there's nothing really that happens. We can't actually move because effectively it's just stuck there. So what we're going to do is go to our player and we're going to start adding a few variables in. So all I've done, I've clicked on add, got to create, and you can see here now I have my create box up. So what we're going to do is start by using the vars. So we're going to add in a few vars here. So one is going to be HSP for horizontal speed. The other one then is going to be VSP for vertical speed. We're going to add another one in then for jump, because we are going to obviously be jumping and so forth, and that's going to be set to false, or we could leave it 0 really. And we're also then going to add another one in for gravity, and we're going to call this global grav, and we're going to give it a value of 0.3. You could do 0.4 if you want more gravity in there. Now the reason we're doing global grav is because we might want to use that elsewhere. There is an inbuilt variable called gravity, but I'm not going to use that at the moment because I prefer to have a little bit more control of my own. So next thing we're going to do is we are going to use a step event. So I'm still in my player here, and what I'm going to do is drag this over a little bit, and we're going to use add event, and then we're going to go to step and step, and we're going to basically do a number of key downs. Now if you can't see this key down, it is in the menu here on the keyboard, and by default it's got this space. We're going to change that to left and right. Now if you wanted to do D and A for WASD, you can basically look there, down there, the letters, and then you could use the D or the A key or choice. I'm going to just use key downs for now. If you are going to use any shooting and you're going to use the mouse to aim, then probably WASD would be better. So I'm going to add in another var here, and what we're going to say is HSP, and then we're going to give it a value. Now one thing that I'm going to just go back on very quickly is we're going to add in another variable in the create, and we're going to make this walk speed, and this is, we're going to give it a value of 4. So this walk speed is effectively then how our player walks, and we can use it in the step here, and we can say walk speed, which is there. Now we're going to use another key down event, and this time we're going to use, instead of a right, we're going to use a left. And again, we're going to use this one here, and we're going to have HSP, and then we'll use minus walk speed. So just to go through this very quickly, when you have you've got your X and your Y, so the X is this axis and the Y is this axis. So if we say a positive X, it's going to go that way. If we say a negative X, it's going to go the other way. Okay. So let's go on that there very quickly, and we can go back to my workspace tab. Now this looks all fairly good, but we need to now apply that to the X. So let's drag this in underneath, and let's say X is going to be HSP, and relative. Now if I play this, what you should see now is the player just moving across, but the problem is I press it once and it keeps on going and going and going. We haven't got a way to stop it. Now one way to stop it is to add in another key down event, and then what we say is if there's no key, right, if there's no key, then what we'll do is we'll add this in and we'll say HSP is then 0. So what this is basically saying is, look, if no key is going to be down, then you can see that's there. There is a downside of this, however, because if I press the up key and the left key together, you can see now I'm just holding the up key down, it's still moving towards the left or the right. Now, a way around that is to not use this, and what we can do is we can basically slow it down naturally just by doing HSP multiplied by, and we're going to multiply by 0.6, which is a decimal. So eventually it'll just go down and down and down. And this way, if I hold 2 keys down, it doesn't matter. It'll just gradually slow down. Now obviously if you want less of a slowdown effect, if you do 0.8, what happens is then it's more of a little gradual slowdown, but you can play with that to see there what number suits yours best. Now we still go through these at the moment because we haven't set our collisions. So that's all very well and good, and that is working out as we hoped. Now there is one downside of doing this. Let me just move this and close this wall. There is one downside of doing this. What happens now, and we've only just made it move, you can see we've got a number of code blocks, and these code blocks will keep on going down and down and down. So what we need is a way of chunking these up into smaller little bits. And to do that, we're going to use something called a script. So if I right click on the scripts folder and go to create and then go down to script, which is here, and what we're going to call it is SCR input. So this is my script for input. Now by doing that, there's something I need you to be aware of here. The name you give it is actually the name of the script, because you can see here the name of the script is down here and it's just called script 1. So what you need to do is make sure you name this part first, right? So if I right click and go to rename SCR input, what I'm going to do is add another one in for collision. So right click, create, and we're going to add in another script. Now this time I'm going to name it straight away SCR collision, press enter, and all of a sudden, look, that's named it, and it's named it there as well. So just a quick tip, when you're making scripts, always name them when you are in the asset browser. Okay, so we've got our script input and there's nothing in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of these apart from one thing into our input script. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete this last one here. See this assigned variable here. I'm deleting this, and I'm going to copy these 4 or 5, right click cut, and I'm going to now paste them in here. Now by cutting them and pasting them, what it's done is it's moved them here. Now I need to move these onto the side. Okay, so notice now where I've just put that one, I've moved that one, put it onto the side there. This I'm moving underneath here, and this I'm moving underneath there. Okay, so everything then goes on the right hand side of that input. Now if I go down to here, this declare new function here, this collision, the first thing that I'm going to do with this is just put X, and I'll say HSP relative, and then that then means my movements are going to work. However, there's one last thing we need to do. If we go back to the player, and what I'm going to look for is this here, the execute script. I'm going to drag that in, and we're going to do the collision script, and we're also going to do the input script as well. Now, when I play my game, everything now is working. Okay, obviously we haven't done any collisions yet at the moment, so we'll go and do that in a moment. But you can see now everything is working again as it once was. Now, all of my code is going to go inside of these scripts now. So in the player, all you'll see are these two execution scripts, which is nice. It makes everything compact. So I'm going to just close that. And in fact, if I right click, go to window and close all, and then let's concentrate now on the collision. So by doing the collision script first, what we want to do is we want to do a collision with the vertical wall, right? Or horizontal, horizontal wall. So this. So what I want to be able to do is move over, and then when we hit the wall, I want to be able to stop. Okay. So let's go into this, and we're going to start off by looking at an if object at place, which is this here. Now notice when I'm putting it up here at the top. Okay, so it's then underneath. So this is already in the player, so we need to test to see if we're near the wall. So object o wall. So what we want to do is we want to say if the horizontal speed, right, is relative, then we're going to do something. So watch this, because this has got quite a few points to it. So we're going to take a declare temporary variable, so it's this one here, and put it into the side here, and we're going to make a temp variable called collide, and we're going to set that to false. So we're going to say if we're going to hit the wall, then collide is false, and now we need to do a test, which is in a loop. And we're going to use a while loop here. So we need to say if collide is equal to false, then what we are going to look at is using the if object at place again. Now notice I put this onto the right side of that while loop again. So what we're going to say is this. We're going to say move in terms of the sign of HSP. Now what that does is it moves a pixel at a time, right? So sign, S-I-G-N, HSP, and both of these need to be relative. And what we want to say is not, right? So what this is basically doing is it's allowing us to move, and then we're saying, right, okay, move until we hit the option. So while we're not hitting, because this is the reverse of it, while we're not hitting, then what we want to do is we want to say X, and then we want to say sign HSP. So we're basically saying, whilst we're not hitting it, move it 1 pixel at a time, 1 pixel at a time, 1 pixel at a time. Now, otherwise, what happens? Well, we need to put an else in. So if we are hitting, well, the first thing we need to do is we need to say that we have collided. So the collide is true. And what we then do is we basically say, well, we need to stop. So HSP becomes 0. Right? Now, the reason we do that is it's a small little test just to see if we are moving and hitting something. So let's play that and see what it does. So if I move and move and move, what's happening is I can go straight up to it and then I stop moving. Okay? And then we can move the other way. Now, one thing we need to do is this here needs a tick on it as well, right? So the X for the sign of HSP, so it adds on all the time. So as you can see, when we go through, we can go there, and then we can go back, and we can go there again, and we stop. Okay, so we've got our horizontal working. Let's now get our vertical working. This is a little bit more tricky. So what we're going to do here is where we've got the X, underneath that, we're going to say VSP for vertical speed. And then what we want to do is we want to say global.grav, and we want to make that relative. So that basically just adds on to us all the time. Now, fortunately, the next part is very similar to what we've just done. We're going to add in an if object at place. So if the object wall, and this time, instead of doing HSP, we're going to do VSP. And then we're going to use temporary variable, and we can call this collide again. And we're going to set it to false. And then we can do a loop again. And what we can say is while collide is false, we're going to use another if object at place. And then we're going to say O-wall. So if O-wall, so that's 0, is the sign of VSP, not. So if we're not hitting the wall, then what we want to do is we want to say Y, because notice now we're on the Y axis, and then we need to make that relative again like we did earlier. Otherwise, what we do is we basically say collide is true, and then we basically say Y VSP. Okay. Oh, wrong way. Sorry, wrong way. So we do VSP 0 if we haven't set it. Okay, so that is good. Now there is one downside we've got here. What we need to do now is go back up here and notice where I'm going to be putting this. I'm going to drag this underneath, and we're going to say Y VSP relative. So what that basically does now is it'll say the VSP, the vertical speed, is going to be applied to the Y. So let's play that. So what we should see now, hopefully fingers crossed, is the other players gone there, and we can't go any further. So this is the premise of our platform. You can see it's working there now at the moment. What happens if I go off the edge? If I go off the edge, we've gone. Okay, and obviously then we've died. So what we need to do now is work out a metric to jump. Fortunately, it's very similar. But there is a downside with the jumping, so I will show you now at the moment. So we've got all of our inputs here, and we've got if key down, if key down. This time we're going to use a similar one, but we're going to use if key pressed. Now the reason we're using key pressed, now notice what I've done. I've put it directly underneath this, right? So it's underneath this function. So we're going to say if the key space is pressed, what we want to do is we want to see if we say Y, say -8. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to temporarily, in fact, I've done that wrong, I think. Let me put VSP for vertical speed. Let's go here. So if we press the space bar now, you can see we are jumping. There is a downside with this, and you can see as I press this all the time, we can jump many a time. It might be something you want, and if that's the case, then your platformer is pretty much ready now to go on to the next part, where you start looking at extending the world and making some collectibles. What is quite nice is when you press this, keep on pressing it, it'll hit to the top of the bar here, right, or the floor. Now, what you have to remember is if you're happy with that, you're ready to go. If not, and you want to basically limit the amount of jumping, well, we need to think now of a little bit of a test to do. So if you remember earlier, we made a variable in the player. So in the player, in the create event, we made a variable called jump, and we set that to false. Okay, so what we can do is we can basically say, we can do an if statement. Okay, So if we add in an if statement here and drag this over here, and what we can say is if jump is equal to false, right? So if it's not jumping, then effectively, if because false is like no and true is yes. So if we're false, not jumping, then we can jump. So let's just play this. So this is still working, but the problem is we can still jump many, many times. Well, the problem we've got is we're not telling it ever that jump is going to be set to true. So let's just change this underneath here. So once we've pressed the space, what we're going to say is jump is now true. Okay, so we've done that now, and when I've pressed it once, you can see now I'm pressing the jump key again, nothing's happening. Why? Well, we haven't got a mechanism now to reset that to true. Now, we can do this in a number of ways. We can do a countdown timer, so you could say, look, after 2 seconds we can jump again, or we can do a little test. So let's try doing the test option. So if I add in an if variable, and what I'm going to say is if place underscore meeting, and I'm just going to zoom this in for a second. So if we say if place meeting x comma y, now I'm just going to put y plus 1. So what that says is if we're within 1 pixel of y, then and its value is greater than 0. So in other words, we're not hitting it, we're within 1. Then what we can do is we can say, well, jump should be then set to false again. So with this bit of code here, what we're doing is we are doing a test here to see if the variable jump is equal to false. If it is, then we can press the space, we'll jump, and then jump is set to true. So let's just try that out now really quickly. So if I press the jump key, now if I press it again, I can press it twice, and then that's my lot. I won't be able to press any more, right? Because we jump, and we're done. Jump, and we're done. So effectively, that will allow us to jump around the first part of this. Now, the last thing that we're going to do is if we go into the player, and if I just press the play for a second, what you'll notice now is when we go left and right, you can see the player's always the same side. So what we're going to do is change the direction it's facing based on obviously the inputs that we give it. So let's go back to input. And then what we are going to look at here is VK right and VK left. So we're looking at this option here, set instance scale. And I'm just going to put one of these under here and one of these under here. So if it's right, then I'm going to leave it as 1. If it's left, I'm going to change it to -1. Okay, now what that does is it'll allow me to go left and right. But you notice it is jumping quite a lot. And the reason it's jumping is because we haven't set the origin of the sprite. So if I double click on the sprite, go here and go to middle center. So this then sets the center point of the sprite. So now it's a much smoother type that we can get into here. And then this allows us to do various other things. And again, if I fall off the edge, we're still going to go off like that. So that's the first part of the platformer done. Once you've got that one set, you can then do the next part. Now the next part is going to be for you to extend the room. Now to extend the room, what you're going to need to do is this. So on the side, when you double click on the room, on the left hand side, you'll notice you've got a width and a height. So what we can do is we can change this width and height. So this room now at the moment is 1366. So if we change this to say 3,366, what happens is then, if I just click on this button, you can see now the room is much wider. If we go up to 4,000, it goes wider again. Okay, now the downside you've got is trying to design something like this. You can still zoom in, but now when I play the game, what will happen is it'll basically make this, and it's going to be quite difficult for you to see. So once you've done that, and you then start editing this a little bit more, so if I just go back to my wall, let's say for argument's sake we want to put this down here, and we want to put a few more little things up here, over here. So once you've done that, what you're going to need to do is set what's called a viewport up. Now a viewport will only look at a certain part of the screen. So to do this, it's really easy. On the left hand side here, if we look at our room again, so if I click on the room, and then on the side here, if I open viewport and then enable a viewport, and then go down to viewport 01 and make it visible, what it does is it puts a white border around. This is showing me how big my viewport is. Now if I change the camera properties, let's make these smaller. Now ideally what I would say is halve these, so make sure you keep them in the correct aspect. Right, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is 1366 divided by 2 is going to be 683. So if I change this to 683, and 367 is going to be, 768 is going to be 384. So what this does then is it makes the box the same size, right, as the camera. Now we also need to say which object to follow. So let's change this to OPlayer. And let's put in 320 pixels border. Now what will happen is when we play this, instead of seeing a long continuous line, you only see part of this. So it makes the game a bit more enjoyable, so to speak. Now if you wanted to have a bigger property window, if you wanted to have something a little bit bigger, then all you do is you change this. Instead of 683, let's go to say 1000. Let's go with that one there, 400. Probably need to be a bit bigger, but you can play around with this just to see. What you don't want to do is you don't want to stretch this like that. Now it's completely stretched, way too much. So if we do 800 on that one, that might be a little bit better. But again, you can play around with this and you can see then what works for you as you start designing this. So if you did want to try to stop the double press, where you can basically go up twice with this, there is another method you could potentially use. So what you can do is you can change this. Instead of if key pressed, what you can do is if you use the if key down, and again space, let's move this up here and move this up here, and then let's close that there. So I'm doing all this in the input script. If we press play, and now we press if key down, it only allows you then to press it once. And if you press it more than once, nothing happens. Now you can see with mine now at the moment, because I've only got +8, it's not enough for me to get up. So what we ideally would need to do is change this from -8 to something else. Like I've just changed that now to 12. If you play that, let's play. Well, that's a bit more, isn't it? That's a bit better, but that might be too much for you to go up. So let's change that now down to 10, and then we'll see how that actually functions. There, our 10's a bit better. See, have we got enough to get up there? Yes, we have. Let's see, have we got enough to make that one? No. Okay, so this is where then you'll need to test your game. So have you got enough to make it back up, as an example, on this? And as we've just seen, mine doesn't. So I'd need almost either to put something down here. So if I go back to my walls, I can then move this and potentially have it there, so that I could almost have a step to go down here, and then back up, and then go up here. That's what makes it obviously a little bit of fun.